The Global Conservation Corps presents the Rhino Man Podcast. I'm your host, John Jerko, and the lead producer and director of Rhino Man the Movie. This podcast series is a way for me to interview top conservationists on the topics of rhinos, the poaching crisis, the importance of rangers, and community engagement, all as a way to create awareness around these issues and to promote the coming release of our film. Rhino Man is a feature-length documentary about the courageous rangers who risk their lives every day to protect the rhinos. We're working on a theatrical and online release come June, July, so stay tuned for trailers, screenings, and more. Today's episode features Don Scott of Tanda Tula.
The overall long-term impact of those pales into insignificance compared to the impact of educating one child. You take a child through the full education journey and take away the ceiling that those children are faced with, and then the impact that those kids have on their children and their grandchildren and even their parents. It's immeasurable.
But before we begin, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is sponsored by Wildlife & Co. This is our very first sponsor, and Wildlife & Co. is our good friend Robbie Harefield's company. Believe it or not, we actually met at the World Ranger Congress back in 2019, before all this crazy COVID stuff happened, and he's been supporting conservation efforts for years through his apparel company. Without him, this first in-person episode of the Rhino Man podcast would not be possible, so we're extremely grateful for his support. To tell you more, Wildlife & Co. is on a mission to protect Earth's ecosystems and wildlife. So the way it works, Wildlife & Co. partners with artists to create unique, high-quality, fair trade apparel that you can purchase in their online store. And then you can look stylish while supporting your love for wildlife. A minimum of 10% of the proceeds from their new apparel line will fund Wildlife & Co.'s nonprofit partners in the field. Another benefit is that a portion of the proceeds from their custom art apparel lines go back to the artists. So not only are you supporting conservation efforts, but you're enabling talented artists to flourish. Going above and beyond this sponsorship, Robbie is putting together an awesome collaboration with GCC and Rhino Man, where they're making a special run of cotton organic hoodies with artwork by Kyle LeBlanc. Those hoodies will feature a limited edition rhino design, and the sales from these hoodies will directly benefit Rhino Man and GCC. So make sure to check them out on Instagram and get some cool apparel that'll support the cause at wildlifeandco.com. You can also see their link in the description, and again, that's wildlifeandco.com. Sponsorships are what will allow us to keep producing this podcast at a high level. We need your support. So if you'd like to sponsor the Rhino Man podcast, get your brand in front of our community, and support our conservation efforts, reach out to us at rhinomanthemovie.org/contact or email directly at info@rhinomanthemovie.org. Thank you for your support. Our guest today is Don Scott. Don and his wife Nina are owners and operators of Tanda Tula, a beautiful safari camp in the heart of the Timbavati Private Nature Reserve. In this episode, we dive into Don's early career in aerospace engineering and how he and Nina found their way into conservation. We talk about the risks and challenges of owning and operating a business in the bush. We go into the positive impact they seek to have through education and literacy, creating pathways for growth and ownership within their company, and developing the local wildlife economy to grow and connect with more locally owned businesses in the Kruger area. We also talk about the importance of rangers and what you should look for in companies and lodges you're supporting while traveling to wildlife areas. Don was thoughtful, passionate, and generous with his time. I can't wait for you to dive into this conversation. So without further ado, here's Don Scott. All right, welcome to the Rhino Man podcast, Don. It's really a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
So I feel like we've, covered quite a variety of different people that are in this kind of wildlife economy, especially in regards to rangers and rhinos, since that's kind of the main topic of this film. But we haven't actually covered anyone that is a lodge owner or landowner and getting that perspective, and heard so many great things about you guys and what you're doing at Tanda Tula, and love to really dig into all those different aspects of what you're involved in and kind of your outlook on conservation and what needs to be done in that space. But, before we dive too much into that, can we just start from the start a little bit? And I'm curious if in your early days growing up, if you had any ties to conservation or wildlife or things that made you think you would eventually end up in this space.
So, well, yes, I did. But I took a long meandering route to end up in this space. So, if I go back to childhood, yes, I think that I had quite an academic family. And in that academic family, my grandfather was a grassland science professor who worked a lot. I mean, he worked all the way from what was then Tanganyika all the way down to South Africa. He did one of the first full grassland studies of Southern Africa. And he was in grassland sciences. That was his thing. So, in fact, even the books on burning theory that they use in the conservation diplomas and degrees today, there's a book written by him. So he introduced us as kids to, I guess, to the game reserves. Not grassland science, because that would have been pretty boring, but to the reserves, and we used to spend time with him. And as a child, probably early teenagehood, I had a desire to end up living and working in the bush one day. But I didn't start that way at all. I think I realized as a teenager that I had two dreams. The one was actually aircraft, and the other one was the bush, which are quite diverse in their directions. And I kind of had this thing of, if I work in aircraft, I can afford to come to the bush a lot. But if I work in the bush, I don't know that I'm going to be able to use that, get involved with the aircraft as a hobby. So I ended up going into engineering and working in aircraft for many years. And I think what happened was that the itch to do more than just visit the bush just never went away. So by the time I got to my late 20s, I was kind of like, this is an itch that I've got to scratch, and I really need to find a way to do this. And I think what happened in life then was, the doors opened as a result of, my relationship with my now wife. We realized that we both shared the same dream, and we decided to take a plunge and actually go into an area that neither of us had really been in other than as visitors. And whilst she had been very much involved in hotels and hospitality in her early career, I hadn't at all. So it was really a leap of faith of, let's try this out, something we can do together and make a business out of it eventually one day. And we chucked in everything in our jobs in Joburg. We moved to the bush, where we worked for a person who was actually a friend of ours who we used to visit a lot at his camp, and he offered us a position to just try it out, to test the water. And we just loved it. We absolutely fell in love with it. We lived very basically, without water and electricity, and cooking on wood fires every night.
So you were just kind of, were you volunteering, or you got like a little side job? Or
we were camp managers.
Okay,
so we were literally hired on camp managers. And hats off to him. He took a leap of faith as well. He kind of said, look, no, I think you guys can absolutely do this. We were not specifically, we were actually looking for guidance as to, how do we get into the industry? And could he help us, look at our CVs? And he ended up offering us a job. So, I mean, a really great opportunity for us that he offered, with, a bit of a risk, I guess, as to whether we were going to actually work out. And we moved, and for 5 years, we operated as camp managers in the bush. Absolutely loved it. Had our first child there. And that was the start. That was the start of the journey to owning our own business in the bush. It also wasn't, it wasn't without its own challenges, and again, a meandering path of entrepreneurial activity, as it always is. We had 5 years in the bush. We moved back to the city for 2.5 years before we were then able to secure something that was actually our dream of having a business that was ours. So in 2009, we finally arrived in the bush with the intention and with the actual, with a deal in place that was a deal that had us as business owners of an operation, which was Tanda Tula.
That's pretty amazing. So, out of curiosity, when you first went to the bush for that 5 years as camp managers, Was that in the Timbavati? How did you guys get connected
Indeed,
to the Timbavati?
yeah. In fact, that was how we ended up making the deal with our ex-partners in Tanda Tula, was that we first went to the Timbavati, and the camp was a few kilometers south of where we are now, and it was amazingly simple life in a way. We're talking about 2002, so we didn't have the technology that we have today to connect with the rest of the world when you're out in the bush. We were literally,
you were out there, huh?
We were out there using radios to communicate with the reservations team, writing everything down. I think it was quite a big day when we got a fax machine and a telephone, which was amazing. But in a way, you really immersed yourself in the bush, and it gave us massive experience of operations to launch us. There was a huge foundation in understanding operations, so that when it came the time to actually take hands on a business entirely, we had this wonderful opportunity to exercise our abilities in operations and understand all the challenges that go with an operational team. So when we took over Tanda Tula, we actually moved down here with the operational team, lived on site with them for 6 years before kind of extracting ourselves and giving them then the space to take over operations completely. I mean, we're still all very operationally involved, and it's not just myself and Nina. Of course, we've got a team. There's 5 of us now, 6 actually as shareholders in the operational business, and that team of shareholders are all heavily operationally involved, from the finance side to the HR side to sales and marketing, vision and strategy, all of that goes with, and then operational control as well. So it was good to understand that by being operationally managing something operationally ourselves for as long as we did, and then on top of that we were in the Timbavati, so we grew a network of people who we knew within the Timbavati. And as a result of that, once, when we exited and we went away for a couple of years and said, okay, now we need to sort of, consolidate and think about, how we're going to actually convert this experience into an ownership of a business. When we started looking again after 2.5 years, we realized we kept on coming back to this area because we had this network. Hoedspruit as a little town was really growing. There was the school. All of those things kind of attracted us to keep looking back here. And it was through that network that we then made the connection with the people who we partnered with at Tanda Tula. And yeah, the rest is history. Here we are.
What else about the Timbavati attracted you? I mean, you said that network of people, and I've gotten to know some of that network as well, and there are some really amazing humans there.
There are.
But was there anything about the space itself, the wildlife, just that reserve in particular that attracted you?
So, yeah, in addition to, first of all, just let me say this, we're all about people. And the wildlife and the reserve are just the cherry on top of that. So we're all about the people. And so when it comes to looking at the people in the Timbavati, we really noticed there was something special going on. So if I talk about all the different commercial operations that are in the reserve, there's an amazing relationship between all of those commercial operations in the reserve. We're all in slightly different spaces. If you were to be really cold and clinical about it, you could say, oh, but aren't you competing for the same guests? And in some cases, maybe there is some overlap, but the real atmosphere of sort of friendship and collaboration that happens in the Timbavati, we felt was like super unique. And we had heard, although we hadn't been ourselves because we hadn't worked in other reserves, but we had heard that there were challenges and issues that other people operationally had to deal with in other reserves that we kind of went, that doesn't seem to be happening here. And guests commented on it as well, where they would be out in the reserve and say, wow, this reserve is... There's something really friendly about all your ranger teams and stuff. When they come across each other in the bush, they really genuinely are friendly and excited to see each other. And so that's the one aspect of it. The other aspect was that, of course, we also noticed that when guiding team professionals left the reserve to go and get experience elsewhere, they often came back. And it was kind of like, there's something about this, you know, there's something really cool about this. So that's on the people side. On the reserve side itself, I mean, I had been coming with my wife Nina to the Timbavati since the 1990s, and it was one of those reserves that was just kind of like, we feel like they're doing it the right way. There's still this deep sense of wilderness. There's a professionalism about it. There's a real desire to, as your primary activity, to protect what you're all involved in, and not just kind of like, well, let's make money here. It was more about how do we protect this landscape, and there was a genuine sort of atmosphere of that's what we're all here to do. And that was before we really met all the landowners and started to understand the network of the landowners and their commitment to it as well. I'm talking about the commercial operators and the people who we interacted with more, you know, in our time when we were there for the first 5 years, and why we then thought to come back again. And I think that Timbavati hasn't changed. It's only got better and more professional and more committed. And I feel like it's a really premium wildlife space in the African landscape. You know, there's been some really groundbreaking work that's been done, and then, you know, harnessed by collaborating with reserves around us, you know, and we are very core to the story of the greater Kruger landscape and its success, and the way that this western boundary of the greater Kruger continues to expand. I mean, that's an incredible success story, and it's very much about reserves like the Timbavati. We're not the only one, but it certainly is about the reserves like us who have, you know, really kind of embedded their commitment to make this huge wilderness space work. So, yeah, I mean, in essence, those are the things that attracted us to come back.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've worked most closely with the ranger team there, and yeah, I feel like I have the same feelings with kind of just their attitude and the way they handle people around them and the leadership there. And it's just, yeah, some incredible human beings, and they have the best interest of the park and the greater area in mind, looking more long term as well. And just in terms of taking care of the ranger teams, from when we started, them not really having any real pickets where they operated out of, to like now some really legitimate like housing out there for the rangers to take care of them, so that they're
100%.
not just, you know,
camping.
Yeah, exactly, camping.
Yeah.
So that's all really positive to see and hear. But before we dive in more on, because I'd love to hear, I feel like you did a little piece on some of the history of Timbavati too, and maybe you can kind of talk about how things have changed in terms of fencing and stuff like that over the years, and some of that aspect. But I'm just curious, like diving a little bit more into your history on the aeronautical side. I mean, was that mostly working on aircraft, doing engineering? Did you ever get your pilot's license on that side of things? Or
so interestingly, I started off as studying aerospace engineering at university, did a postgrad, and then got hired into the military aerospace industry, actually, which is where all the high-tech stuff was happening. And South Africa had quite a dynamic, small but very dynamic industry at the time. And I had a few of my colleagues who would, fly as a hobby. I was not into that at all. I was kind of like, I'm working 8 hours a day on designing aircraft. I want to do other stuff. Didn't want my life to be too linear from that perspective. But I always had an interest in my eye on possibly flying one day. And only when I exited the aerospace industry and said, right, this is where we want to make our lives, finally, I then started looking into sort of having some. So I guess when these things are in your blood, you also don't get rid of those. Just like my desire to come and live and work in the bush was in my blood, aircraft are in my blood. So, after a couple of years of discussing it and talking about it and seeing if I could do it, Nina eventually signed me up at a flight school and said, teach this guy to fly, otherwise I'm going to, brain him. So I started. I actually only started flying in about 2015.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's very useful because we live far from everything, and so as a family, it's really useful to have someone in the family who can fly and take us places, and we use it a lot for the business as well. So, when we need to do meetings in Johannesburg or Nelspruit or whatever, it's a whole lot safer than having to drive,
Those roads are probably the most dangerous thing in South Africa.
Yeah. So yes, I do have a continued relationship with aircraft. There's no question about it. But it's now a hobby relationship rather than my core focus. And whilst I enjoyed working in the aerospace industry, I enjoy running businesses in the bush a whole lot more. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny how once you got some space from that job, then you can kind of enjoy it as more of a hobby and a side thing. And this is a beautiful place to be able to fly too. I mean, I've been up there with some of the bush pilots as well.
Oh no, it's amazing. And absolutely amazing.
Stunning out there.
Yeah, I mean, there are people who come down here to learn to fly because Hoedspruit is this great little hub for it, and it's just this most incredible weather, the most incredible scenery. So yeah.
And so when you transitioned into working in the concert or this space with lodging and things like that, what were some of the growing pains for you? I'm just curious. Was there anything that you came in with a certain mindset and then you hit a wall and were like, oh, maybe this is how we should do it? Or
Oh yes. So I think that the key thing there was the whole, you've been working and both Nina and myself had been working in corporate Johannesburg. Me in engineering. She moved through a number of different industries in sort of like the marketing and corporate communication space, but both of us very corporate. And so there was this real Joburg kind of everything must get done yesterday kind of attitude. And when we first moved down to the bush, that was our biggest wake-up call. And I'm going to park that for a second. I'll come back to it. But the other one, which was the opposite, was as an engineer, I was kind of like, okay, look, I spend my time running teams, engineering teams of people and so on. But, unlike Nina, who had been in the hospitality industry before and had experience with it, I was kind of like, I wonder how I'm going to enjoy the whole interaction with the guest side of the social side of it.
Yeah.
So that was a surprise for me as well, but in the opposite way. Because what I was nervous about turned out to be one of the things that I got the most energy from. And, it was something that I should actually never have even concerned myself with, because when I think back, we were rampantly social in Johannesburg. So we had a moving social circle of probably 40 plus people. So all I did was translate that into sort of a professional space, which was hugely rewarding and very energizing. When you've got your head in a generator or under the hood of a car half the day, and then you got guests who come back from game drive and they're just like beaming. All of that stuff just goes away, and you get involved in something that's really positive and energizing.
It's like instant feedback too from like how things are working and 100%. How people.
That as well. When you're working in corporate industry, you often don't see the client end of it. And it's what I always say to my team on the ground now. I still say that today is, guys, we have a very unique and a wonderful work environment where we get to see immediate feedback from what impact we are having on our guests. And it's hugely positive and energizing. So that was something. And then coming back to the kind of the attitude of the Joburg corporate hitting the bush. I mean, we didn't come up against a wall so much as came up with a huge realization where, things moved at a different pace. I'm not going to say a slower pace. They had a rhythm that was different to what we were used to in the city. And we very quickly learned that, you don't walk in to work in the morning and say, okay, what's happening, who's doing what. There was a process, especially with, rural South Africans. There's a whole different process there. It is about, how did you sleep last night? What dreams did you have? These are important things, and then talk a little bit about the family and so on, and then you get the day going. So there was a very strong transition on how we manage our businesses that involved, cross-cultural management and a very sort of inclusive management approach, not making decisions and handing them down, but rather getting everybody into the boma, under the tree to discuss it and say, And very often, the decision you would want to have made is what everybody agrees with anybody. In any case, it's just that there's a desire for it to be discussed just before just being told that this is what it is.
Yeah.
So all of those, what I refer to as cross-cultural management processes, was something that we really realized right up front. This is hugely important. And then once we had recognized that and started to work in that way, then everything just flowed and became so much easier. And then your cohesion amongst your team becomes something that, goes from a group of staff to a family of staff. And so that was a very, very important realization for us.
Yeah, that sounds like such a, working a little bit in the corporate world, I feel like sometimes people forget that getting people's buy-in or even being able to communicate the why of what you're doing is so important in the motivation of the people that are working with you.
Exactly.
And yeah, it's kind of interesting how it sounds like you were almost kind of forced to evaluate that.
Very much so. I mean, if we hadn't, I think, business would have stagnated on the operational side for us, because then you end up getting, you will end up getting a resistance, like a passive resistance. Yeah. So we didn't want that. And it required us to change, not the team on the ground to change, So that was very cool.
Yeah.
It was actually a great learning journey for the both of us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think those rules can be equally applied to that corporate world too, because I think you have that probably passive resistance, but maybe you don't notice it because there's so many people and there's so much structure and all these things.
Probably also true. I must say, interestingly, for the company that I did work with for 11 years in the aerospace industry was a group of French guys who had set up shop here in South Africa. And what was interesting there, that was also cross-cultural, but there was one thing that they always did. Every morning, they went through all the offices from the managing director, walked around and greeted everybody. And it was quite interesting because that was not a South African thing at all, And then sitting for lunch every day. Very important, Everyone stops, go and sit down, have lunch, have a conversation. So that, in a way, maybe that, I didn't realize it, but maybe that had an impact on my willingness to look at another way of doing business when we were faced with a completely different cultural context. So
yeah, interesting. And it's funny, I mean, spending a lot of time in South Africa, especially this area, so maybe it's more to this area, but I realize there's maybe 3 to 5 or 6 different ways you can say I'm coming now. There's now, just now.
Absolutely.
Have slightly different
slight variations and never very accurate either. Yeah. They could all mean a variety of things.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, very true.
So once you guys started, was it basically there was already Tanda Tula was already there, and you guys came in as partners, and then slowly
absolutely.
Took more of it open?
So just to give you a bit of history there, I mean, and in fact, what's lovely about this is that we've just delved into our own history right now because we did this huge rebuild of our flagship camp of Tanda Tula Safari Camp. So, we really went back in time to look at where did it all start. We've always known, but Tanda Tula as an operational business started in 1976. So we're talking about a company that had a good number of solid years of history before we ever got involved. And in fact, it started off in a completely different location to where it is now. It was in the position that King's Camp is in today, and it was the old warden's residence in the early 1970s. So when the operation started, there had been one other camp in the Timbavati before that, and I think that was called Sobili. But that shut down in early 1976. So Tanda Tula effectively became the first, very shortly afterwards, followed by Motswari, possibly even in the same year, but it was very much one of the first in the Timbavati itself. Motswari being actually just north of the Timbavati and the Umbabat.
I mean, just to go into the history a little bit more, was it mostly before that just landowners and like farms or things like that, or how was Timbavati structured?
Correct. So it was a group of landowners. There were no commercial operations, and it was only in the late 60s that and hats off to them. The Sabi Sands took the pioneering steps of having the very first commercial operations, Malamala, Londos, those places, and I think that in the early 70s. People started to look down to our southern neighbors and go, okay, well, they're doing stuff. Maybe there's something here. And interestingly, I've got this whole history of the Timbavati as a great big tome of a book, which was written by a couple who stayed in the reserve for many years and dug into the history going all the way back to, the early 1900s. And this concept of, utilizing the land for some kind of commercial activity was always in the minds of these landowners from the very moment they got together. But their focus was always about protecting the land for future generations. They had no desire for financial gain, and I think the concept of moving to allowing some commercial activity was more around, and I've seen the passages on this, around concern that the land could be taken away and used for something else. Government could move in, and I'm not talking now modern South African government of today. I'm talking about the apartheid government back in, the 1960s and 1970s. So there was already discussion about that, like what happens if the Minister of Agriculture just says, okay, sorry, this land would be better used for agriculture, and then they would lose it. So there was a recognition that the land and the activity on that land needed to show some sort of return for external parties to go, oh, okay, it has a relevance and a validity in this landscape. So anyway, that's a very long history lesson that we can get into.
No, super interesting, yeah.
But so prior to that, yes, all the landowners had literally just, been, I guess, just funding the reserve out of their own pockets, and then in the 1970s, it became, with Tanda Tula starting, and then shortly after that, there were other ones that started as well, but on a very, very limited scale. So, as I said, Tanda Tula was very much, it looked like a old Kruger Park camp, with the thatch rondavels and so on. And
if I can interrupt you one more time around this.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, at the early stages, were these lodges only able to operate within their property within the Timbavati, because now everything's open and connected, which we can maybe go into
very
more,
definitely. I mean, I can't. I've never looked at that specifically, but I imagine that they were fairly contained to their own specific land that was owned by the landowner where that operation was. I'm sure there might have been some discussions and landowners working together to traverse. But if you have and that still exists today, is if you have a private landowner, they have a different view on how the land should be traversed, and they're not always open to the idea of commercial traffic. And I completely respect that. It needs to be that mosaic of some land that is just less traversed and other land that is connected, and you have this traversing sharing between the commercial partners on the reserve. So going back, though, to 1976, I actually have a book, and we're going to be putting this in now on a mural in the new camp, that is the first reference to Tanda Tula, and it's a book called The White Lions of the Timbavati that was written by Chris McBride, who was a researcher on lions in the day. You've probably read it. I just recently bought a second-hand copy through Amazon. I didn't think I was actually going to get it, but they did actually have it, and I got it, which is amazing. And I reread the whole book, and about the second chapter from the end, he mentions in a passage and says, I've been asked to assist in establishing a commercial operation or commercializing a camp in the Timbavati, and it will be called Tanda Tula. So that was the first reference in this book, and he was, that was 1975, 1976, so it was quite cool to see that. Yeah. So as a business, been going since 1976, operated in that position of the old Warden's Camp until 1995 around about, and then the landowning family, I think the father passed away, and then all the various kids were distributed pieces of land that were according to because they had a lot more land that was actually part of the family land than just where the Tanda Tula of the day was operating on. And so, the different children got different pieces of land, and Marlene, who was our ex-partner, she got the piece of land that Tanda Tula Safari Camp was then set up on. So they moved the Tanda Tula operation from where it was to the location where Tanda Tula Safari Camp is today.
Was that a new build when they did that?
That was a completely new build, yeah. And they did it, it was all these, it was the first sort of East African style Meru tent operation in the Lowveld. So it was quite unique and quite out there and quite edgy that they were doing something like that. And I think it was massively successful because it occupied a space that very few other no other operators were doing. And then as new operators came on board that did have tented, Tanda Tula had it, there was the real DNA to say, we've done tented for a long time. So so that was in 1997 that tented camp opened. And then it went through a number of phases of facelifts and changes. If I look back at the photographs, that what was Tanda Tula in 1997 with a shade cloth over the tents and a funny little walkway down the side. It was really cute. But when I saw Tanda Tula for the first time, which was when I was in the reserve from 2002 to 2006, it was already different to what it had been in 1997 when they opened. So they had done these thatch roofs over the tents and they'd jazzed up the bathrooms a bit. And so now it was getting quite like, high end. And then when we came in, that was in 2000 and in 2008, we decided this is, we really need to make the move out of the city and, form our lives in the bush with our own business. And, through the network, we ended up chatting to the McKays in those days, who were the landowners and operators of Tanda Tula.
So you were like looking at different opportunities or operations?
Lots of different opportunities. Yeah. There was options were options in Botswana, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and the only thing was that for all of those, we felt like we did not have a network. We were now going to start all the way from scratch. We had a little boy who was only 3 years old, tagging along with us, and where we were going to live, where was he going to go to school. There was a lot of those thoughts around, the decision of where do we go, and we kept coming back to this area and the Timbavati specifically. And then, timing, the way the universe puts things in front of you, the doors started to open, and we met with the McKays and sat down over lunch and basically came out literally over a lunch, came out with the heads of a plan for us to take over their operation in the Timbavati. And we had a very kind of concise thought pattern as to how that should play out. So we formed the partnership, we bought in, and part of our plan was that we needed to be on the ground and we needed to move all the business operations to the camp. So, the whole operation must run from the office at the camp, meaning finances, HR, everything.
What was the main reasoning behind that? Was it just you felt that proximity would just help things run better because everyone's
Absolutely.
Working together, you can see what's happening right there?
That was exactly it. We needed, So we wanted to be at the sharp end of the battle where the guests are. We didn't want to be in some remote office location far away. We wanted to be where the guests were so that we could keep a very strong eye on operations and help the team to develop the kind of style of operation that we wanted. And then coming with that, we needed to run all aspects of the business because our partnership deal was that we were responsible for everything. They were completely hands-off, and we needed to run the entire thing. So, which was a huge leap of faith for them too, actually, because here were these two people who had done operations management for 5 years, and could they do this? So again, hats off to these personalities in these reserves who had the kind of the vision and the appetite for risk to go, let's try something new here. Whatever they were doing, they must have got to a point where they felt like we need to try something else. And we offered them that opportunity of something else. And one of our things was we've got to be on the ground, so we need to move everything here. So they had an office in Cape Town that was, we agreed that up front, that was all shut down. All the data was moved here. And we had the office So it was an efficiency thing. It was much more efficient to have everything running from one space where everybody is every day. You can have discussions, make decisions, and move on. And it just really increased the efficiency of the business, brought down costs, and then allowed us to focus on generating revenue. So, so that was how we got to Tanda Tula in 2009. So it was very much a running business. It had a lot of history behind it. It had a well-known name in amongst the tourism and tourism trade, as well as with numerous regular guests. And we just came in and initially kind of increased efficiencies, and then, of course, the idea was that we really needed to drive revenue and get the name of the business out there more, tell people what we're doing so that they're more aware of Tanda Tula as a brand in the broader sort of private lodge landscape in the Lowveld area. And so that was very much Nina's drive, and she did all of that. And then we continued operating as a tented camp until 2021, when we made the decision to do this big upgrade. In the meantime, in about 2011, our partners in those days, the McKays, for various reasons needed to sell up, and they approached us and said, look, we've got to exit here. It was a very sad process for them because they had been in the reserve as a family for many, one of the first families in the reserve, and one of the founding families of the 1956 sort of consolidation of the various landowners into a reserve. So I think that was a hard decision for them. And of course, what we wanted to do was hopefully honor what had been built up to now and take it further. And so we bought them out of the business, and then we managed to, not ourselves, but through collaboration with other people on the ground here and the network in Hoedspruit, managed to find a landowner who was willing to buy in on the land so that we could continue operating the business on. And that relationship has now been going for 11 years.
Oh, wow.
And we've now formed a new partnership with that landowner to take the next step into actually growing the Tanda Tula business further. So we're super excited. It's been an amazing journey. And I think we've actually got ourselves into a space now where we really feel strong about where the brand sits. We feel we've got years of experience in the work that we've done within the reserve and how that, how that increases the sustainability and the potential for our actual hospitality business. So, yeah.
That's a really incredible journey. And like you were saying, for those previous owners to trust you guys in that way is pretty incredible, because I feel like oftentimes, especially if the previous owner is somewhat involved or has a stake in it, it's hard for them to let go, like you said. And
absolutely.
They keep micromanaging things and all that stuff.
100%. And I think that, in a way, for us, we were very lucky with the timing. The universe timed things just right for us. But both in our time when we first went to the reserve, Marco and his decision to allow us as complete outsiders to come in and run operations for him, and then later Marlene to take that leap of faith to say, actually, I'm going to trust you guys and you need to run with this, and actually for her to back off completely. Incredible, actually. And we're forever thankful to those personalities who gave us the opportunity.
Yeah. It sounds like the universe was working on both sides, because they wanted someone they could trust and feel good about kind of transitioning as they transitioned out, and they found the right people. Sounds like, yeah.
I tell you, when we because we did 6 months of due diligence before we actually finally, got going and moved to the bush. And when we finally put pen to paper and signed everything up at the end of 2008, I remember we were driving back to the airport from Cape Town, and I said to Nina, I feel like I've just been given the keys to the Ferrari, and I hope I don't crash it on the first corner.
You talked a bit about the work you had to do operationally in terms of making efficiencies, making it more profitable, and then the marketing side, getting the name out there. But did you and Nina have a vision at the beginning that kind of set you down a certain path, and how did that evolve over time? Because you guys are doing a lot of incredible things outside of just being an amazing lodge camp to go to.
So I think that we hadn't really concretized exactly what it was going to be in terms of what, but we definitely had a 5-year plan on what we wanted the business to be and how we wanted the business to evolve. Then our sort of involvement in our broader landscape was something that was more just something that had developed when we had worked as operations managers, and that whole realization about how important cross-cultural management is. We got involved in those days, with the Southern African Wildlife College and an environmental education program for school kids, and that with work that we did with fair trade tourism in South Africa. I think we realized that both of us felt that there was a responsibility to business owners in this landscape to commit to doing more than just running their businesses. And then also, from a personal perspective, we got a massive amount of personal reward, from seeing, some of the successes in those, in the involvement in the broader landscape that we did in those first 5 years. So when it came to what we were doing at Tanda Tula, there was no question. We knew exactly how we wanted the business to run, how we wanted operations to be, how we wanted the team to be managed. And I'm going to just go down a little diversion here. When we took over, we did not need to change one person on that team. The top management, obviously, they were more short-term, and and obviously we were moving in now as the top management of the business, so that changed. But in terms of all of the rest of the team, the guides, the chefs, the kitchen staff, the housekeepers, everyone stayed. And for the most part, we still have that entire team today. What we have had is a few people retire. We've had people on our team who started in the 1970s and who are now retired, who we continue to use sometimes as freelance staff, which is amazing. But we definitely had that as a clear vision. This is how we want things to run. This is how we want the ethos of the team to be. And then we always knew that there should be more, but we didn't know what that was going to be. We had no idea, because we didn't know what was available in the broader landscape and who we should become involved with. So, the first thing was really the education journey, and that came when we realized just how many of our adult staff were unable to read and write. So there was an adult literacy issue. And a lot of our staff at the time required a translator in the room with you to have any kind of meeting and discussion. The other thing was that they could not, read through any documents as simple as, a bank statement, or as complex as an employment contract. So it was really important for us. We realized very early on, okay, we've got quite a challenge here. So that was, there in the back of our minds. And then, I'd love Nina to actually tell you the story. I'm probably not going to do it justice, but what happened was, she was at the bar one day, and Smiling, who's one of our barmen, and in fact not just a barman now, he's actually quite a senior frontline guy. He was sitting paging through a National Geographic, and Nina said to him, "Hey, Smiles, you're reading the National Geographic. What do you think of the articles?" And he said, "Well, I enjoy looking at the pictures, but there's a lot of words here that I just don't get, and I'm not really following the story." And she said, "Well, would you like to?" And he said, "Of course, yeah, I'd love to." And so she said, "Okay, well, we chatted about it, and she said, I think I need to start a reading club, And so, we then discussed sort of, okay, well, let's put it out there to everybody and say, look, who wants to join the reading club? And we'll have a twice a week session, get some magazines or whatever and sit down. And so Nina put this out, and the next morning we had 28 staff members arriving to say, we've come to sign up for the school. And then we realized, okay, no, the desire to learn is even much greater than, our recognition of the issues with adult literacy in the team at the time. A lot of them being the older ladies in the team, so I mean, we had people who'd grown up during the apartheid era, rural South Africa, I mean, really the back end of the education system completely, and then the apartheid education system to boot. So, they'd grown up with no requirement to go to school and a need to get out there and work as soon as possible. So, that economic need overtook the educational sort of fundamentals, and you had a lot of people who, could not look through their cell phone and find their kids' names. They had to have someone help them with it. Anyway, so there was great enthusiasm for this. Nina realized, okay, hang on, this is a bit bigger than what I realized. She got in touch with a great friend who was an adult education specialist in Joburg, and she said, oh, I see you're trying to single-handedly take on the South African education system. So there was kind of like, right, now we actually need to let's just take this step by step. So that education program started with a reading club and then ended up with us having full-time teachers who would come in and work every day with different classes, different levels, some people completely illiterate, some people with a level of literacy but needed sort of additional, and some more advanced but would like to do additional courses and learn things that are broader than just what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So that ran for a number of years, and that was the sort of the core of the education foundation. And it was obviously massively satisfying to see particularly these ladies who could now sit in a meeting and talk to us in English, and could read and write, and go home and read books to their children, Those sorts of connections were massively satisfying to see. So, and like I say, Nina can probably deliver this story a lot better than I can, but that was the essence of it, and she was very much behind driving all of that. Then we realized that, in order to prevent this history from repeating itself, and knowing that the rural education system today still is very much, we have not unpacked the apartheid education system, and there's been articles about it in the press a lot, that we're still struggling, particularly with the rural schools. They're the last to be thought about, and everything takes a long time, and there's really a big problem with sort of, the level of teaching, the availability of textbooks, the facilities themselves, all of that is problematic. And so we felt like we're going to end up with adults again who are just not able to compete with the adults who are going through schools in Johannesburg and Pretoria and Cape Town and Durban. So we kind of thought, well, the best way to do this is to start kids from when they're little, and let's not try and, as our friend had said, don't try and solve the entire, take on the entire education system. The model was, let's get super quality education for as many kids as we can afford. And that was then when we started the scholarship program. So that was born out of the adult literacies program. And then we started with this, with the education scholarship program for the kids. And we, charity starts at home. We looked at all of our team of staff, of our family of staff, and said to them, guys, we'd like to assist and incentivize, with allowing children of this age to get into a really quality education path and offer it to you, understanding that if you're going to take that decision to do that, you need to be part of that education journey with your children. You can't it can't just be fire and forget, off they go. And so that was also something that required a certain, in fact, more than selecting the children, it was about selecting the parents and making sure that they could actually support their kids through a education journey like that. So those kids then came to Southern Cross schools in Hoedspruit, which is where our children are. It's a private school, IEB education. So when these kids get out of matric, they are really walking away with a proper quality education that can compare to any of the schools in Johannesburg. And so that grew, and we now have seven children on that scholarship program. And we have, in fact, we've now gone this year for the first time, just about halfway through last year, going into this year for the first time, we've now spread just beyond Tanda Tula staff, and we've taken on a child who was at the school before, funded through a different organisation, and he lost his funding. So we've actually then decided to continue because he's just a really quality kid and has massive potential. So and then we've done the support of 2 university students as well. One, Vusi, who is working for us today, and the other one, bizarrely, who studied aerospace engineering at my alma mater at Wits. He was, we were introduced to him via friends of friends, and I couldn't believe it. As a kid out of Acornhoek who didn't even go to any private school. He came straight out of Acornhoek and went to Johannesburg with his desire to study aerospace engineering, and did really well in first year, got a scholarship from the banks. But then when he struggled in second year, which I also struggled in my second year, the banks just yanked the funding out from under him. So he then returned to Acornhoek and started working as a maths and science teacher in the local schools to earn money to go back. So this guy hadn't given up. And we met him at that time, and then we said, okay, no, we need to help out. So, and more than just the funding, it was also having that network. I had a network in the aerospace industry, so I could introduce him to colleagues, and I got a company involved that actually took him on for internship programs and that sort of thing. So, again, it's not just about the money, and this is the other thing that we've realized in supporting particularly the education journey of people from the rural areas. It's very strongly about how you support those children through their education journey. You can't just put a check on the table. You need to help coach the parents when they're at school, or once they get to the end of school, you have to realize that journey is not over. How do we help them find a tertiary education or get employment or whatever that might be? And then further than that, once they're in the tertiary education, how do they then get into the industry that they're trying to study in? You come out of Acornhoek or Velferdent or Kluvukani, nobody in Joburg. And you certainly don't know people. If you're now studying commerce, you want to get into the banks, or you want to, like as Relof, the university student who studied aerospace, he didn't have a clue who the businesses were that he could approach, and how he was even going to approach them. So those networks and that ability to support the kids through their education journey, I think, is as important, if not more important, than the actual money to fund their education.
Yeah. So it's really more of a relationship and a mentorship almost that you're creating with these young men and women.
100%.
Yeah. And maybe you could go into it a little bit. I mean, it's kind of covered. Maybe it's obvious in what you were just saying, but for people that don't live in South Africa, they're from the States or Europe or anywhere else, why is it so important for these young kids to get this education and to develop themselves in this way? And what are the challenges that are stopping them? Because, from what I've been learning about Tanda Tula and some other great organizations is, creating pathways so that people can move up in their careers. And I think a lot of this education is the obstacle in the way.
So I think that, and Nina and I, having lived in this environment for 22 years now, our feeling is that everything starts from education. So if we can get the education right, we could solve all of the primary healthcare issues. We could solve all of the, sanitation issues. We could solve so many things, and eventually solve some of the thing that everybody loves to complain about, the public administration issues and the bureaucracy and all of that, because you have people who have capacity. Now, I'm not saying that there's not capacity at adult level now in these structures like whatever it might be, Home Affairs or the Roads Department or whatever, but it needs a lot more. So what we've noticed was that children coming out of the rural education system they are faced with a ceiling because of that lack of education. And by giving them quality education, what you do is you increase the economic lifespan of those children. It becomes the impact of one child being given quality education is so much more than the impact you will have in going to, and I'm not taking away from that. There's important, but there's important work being done by people who are doing charitable work, okay? But the impact of other charitable work, which could be, putting in boreholes, which is a fantastic thing, by the way, or, helping with the infrastructure of a school or with, some equipment. The overall long-term impact of those pales into insignificance compared to the impact of educating one child. You take a child through the full education journey, and let's say you get them through, a university degree, which it doesn't have to be either. I mean, they could do other stuff nowadays. It's, there's so much available, in terms of online courses and that kind of thing in order to be a contributor to a career. But do that journey and take away the ceiling that those children are faced with. And then the impact that those kids have on their children and their grandchildren and even their parents, it's immeasurable. So you then take that and you convert it into the economic lifespan of the investment that you've put in. And like I say, it comes out to be immeasurable. So our focus is so much on education because we believe that education will solve so many other things if done right. And then the secondary is that, the ability to remove any ceiling for development from those children who go through a quality education program. So, and South Africa, one of our biggest challenges today is exactly that. We have not been able to, and make no mistake, it was a complex system to try and dismantle. But we are not there yet, and we haven't dismantled it, and there are still large sectors of the population who are faced with coming out of school with such a poor education that they are not actually fully literate, and they can read and write, but they cannot read and write complex stuff. And if you talk about comprehension literacy, that is and you measure it on that. There's a lot of kids coming particularly out of the rural schooling systems that are still struggling very, very much with that. The other thing, of course, is that, and I'm going to stick my neck out here a little bit, and I might have people who would say otherwise, but we're a country that recognizes very strongly, and correctly so, we recognize that we are a rainbow nation and we have a variety of cultures within that nation, and we want to celebrate, the differences that those cultures bring to the table, and they do. So, but one of the things that leads out of that is that there has been quite a strong lobby for, the people who are living in different areas and people whose home language is, let's say, for example, the local area here, Xitsonga, that is the home language, to then have their entire education journey in Xitsonga. Now, that would be fine if everybody in South Africa was speaking Xitsonga, but we're not. Our lingua franca is English. Our language of business is English. So when children come out of school not being able to speak English, you put another ceiling on top of them. So, that's another aspect of our learning and education journey that we're involved in now, and we're actually intervening on it right now with some of our frontline team members, is taking their English capability to the next level, bringing in teachers, working with them on, the use of English in our environment. And what we would like to do as a next step is take that to a pre-hire phase. So where we do find that we are going to need to hire new staff, that staff member actually goes through a 6-month intensive English language training course, so that they come out being able to really confidently speak and understand what is being said to them, especially when you're in the guest-facing environment where, 99% of your guests are actually all speaking English, and to boot with an accent. So you've got to kind of like get your head around that as well. So that's another step in the whole education journey that we're getting involved in now.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of amazing things to talk about within that. I mean, I think, there's so many people trying to tackle all the issues around preserving these natural spaces and wildlife. And there are a lot of also short-term strategies involved, and those are needed often to kind of hold the ground.
100%.
But unless there's that bigger change long-term, and a lot of that, like you said, it starts with education, we're kind of fighting a losing battle, because people are starting to get wise and realize that we need to really involve local communities, have them take ownership, and have them manage these places. But if the education system is set up in a way where it's really hard for them to even be able to, read in the language that is kind of a global language now, whether you like it or not, English, then it really, like you said, sets a ceiling and doesn't allow for that growth long term, and the ability to hand over these different projects or businesses to local community members.
Absolutely. And I think that the concept of ownership in the wilderness, in the wildlife economy. So if we now talk the broader, we've talked a lot at the moment about like Tanda Tula as a business and what we're doing, but of course there's a huge broader community that we're part of. I've been fortunate to be on the executive committee of the Timbavati since 2011, so I've had a view into what that broader landscape is, and then through work with the Sandparks people and the Greater Kruger Strategic Development Framework, have a view even broader than that. Not just the private reserves, but the national parks, and then the Greater Limpopo Transfrontier Conservation Area, which are these huge landscapes and involve so many different people and so many different landowners, communities, business types, personal views and agendas, all of those things. So that landscape has been, I have to say, massively successful, but it is not without its challenges. And the big challenge for us is that as a wildlife economy, the wildlife economy has to be relevant to the communities in which that economy is embedded. I've said this so many times, and it's a bit of an odd analogy, but I'm trying to get away from the concept of who's the community. When one talks about community development, there's often this sort of, this view that it's a charitable process. So I always say, let's take the banks in Sandton. If all of the banks in Sandton and the banking economy of Sandton, who's their community? It's the Sandton community. It's the shop owners. It's people who live around there. It's the malls. It's the people who own and run buildings. That's their community. Now, if the banking community chose to spend its money in a way that excluded their community, they would not be welcome in that community. And if the banking community was not really making any money and was, kind of a bit of a bleed on that community, they would also probably not be that welcome in that community. So if we translate that to where we are, now we're in a rural environment, and the wildlife economy is defined by one thing: it needs space. We cannot build thousands of beds in multi-story hotels and, just, make this thing work through volume. It doesn't work, because we need to protect the thing that we are sharing with our guests, and that is this massive open space. So what that means is that you cannot, A, have a lot of operations in these reserves. B, you cannot employ everybody. You cannot employ the thousands that a mine could employ or that an agricultural activity to employ. So you need to think in a different way as to how you can impact the community that you're embedded in with that low density of economic activity. And I mean, don't get me wrong, we have a big economic impact. If I look at what our contribution to the GDP, and I'm going back to a study that was done in 2016, it's grown since then. We had like a 6.7 billion rand overall economic impact to the country back in those days when the study was done. So it's a significant industry for an area that is rural. And so what you're saying about ownership in that wildlife economy is the critical thing. And you're right, you don't get to proper ownership and proper participation in that economy unless you have proper education of the people. And that's where we're still, finding the challenges. And again, what you were also alluding to, the point about there's short-term strategies, and particularly the work that you guys have focused on educating people about and focused energy on is the protection services that we have for the wilderness landscapes. Absolutely critical. Without the increase in capability in those protection services and area integrity services over the last 15 years, since 2008, I think we would have long ago lost every rhino. We would have long ago lost the next thing that would be on the list after the rhinos were gone. So it was absolutely crucial that we consolidated a strategy to, increase the security capabilities of these reserves. But as you say correctly, and there was you can pick it up in the press somewhere, and sometimes journalists are they're kind of like a bit mischievous, and they talk about a fortress mentality and so on. And yes, we've had to implement a fortress mentality just to to
stabilize
the situation. Exactly. And I feel that that's been done exceptionally well. And now we're all very, with eyes wide open, we're all looking outward to say, okay, now how can we change the involvement of the community in the wildlife economy to the extent where they become owners? And that ownership could mean, and I think you and I were talking about this a little bit before, and it's something that the Timbavati is very involved with as a pilot project, is a very specific intervention to say, okay, let's take the lodges, the commercial operations, let's take the reserve itself, so the reserve that is managed by a team. All of us, we all buy stuff. We need stuff. We need, food for our meals, we need drinks, but we need more than that. We need services for our Land Rovers. We need, or our game viewers. Let's not be let's not be brand specific. We need services for our game viewers. We need air conditioners to be serviced. We need tents to be repaired. We need builders. We need thatchers. We need all of these things are things that we buy, right up to bookkeeping and accounting services, and more high-end stuff, auditors. So, if we're buying all that stuff, if we work together as a group, could we establish a consolidated demand within the reserve that then we could look and say, okay, where are we buying it from? And if it is Joburg or Cape Town or Nelspruit, could we, rather than doing that, get a coalition of the willing together that say, let's rather hyper-localize our purchase of those items or those services. So that's a program that we started on about 4 years ago, and it kind of got accelerated during COVID because there was a very strong desire, and that desire has played out quite well in the greater Kruger landscape and all of the reserves involved in the greater Kruger to, after COVID, let's build this thing back better. We've got an opportunity to do it in a better way. So we've been working on this for about 4 years and accelerated during COVID. COVID, obviously, a portion of it was like a halt. And then we came back and said, okay, hang on a second. This is the way that we can do it. So initially, coming from Sandpark side, so understand that Sandparks, as the Kruger, as the national park, they're also very focused on doing this. What they were talking about, though, was to implement a landscape-wide program. In other words, do it at scale. And our philosophy was, if you try and do it at scale, it will fail because of the scale, because it's just too big. So we said, what if we take a smaller project, get one or two of the reserves together, or even one, it's turned out to be one, and the lodges within that reserve, and get them to identify businesses in the local community that is around them and say, okay, which of these businesses are ready to engage with us, which businesses, by the way, are already engaging with us. We already have 2 businesses that are part of the enterprise development program, and they have been supplying services into the reserve for years already. Now they're on a higher tier of development where they are getting down to how's their health and safety managed, what are their HR processes, are they, all of their statutory compliance in terms of tax and that type of thing. And then there are ones that are next level down who are kind of informal but ready to take that step into sort of a more formal economy. And then there's the pure startups who I want to do this, I'm doing it with my neighbors, and I'd like to be able to do it into the broader economy. So we've identified those, and we already have now 10 businesses that have been selected that we are specifically engaging with. And we've brought in an external mentoring business, actually, called Indalo Inclusive. And their job is that their entire role is mentoring businesses from informal to formal. How to, make sure that you are compliant with all of the variety of rules that South Africa has in place for a business to operate in.
It's almost like an entrepreneurship incubator in a little way.
It is an incubator. Yeah. It is an incubator, exactly. And so they're involved, and then we're involved all on the buying side, including the reserve management, and then the businesses themselves on the ground are involved. So we've kind of found each other. And now the next step in that story is for us to continue to do business in such a way that it encourages other people to do the same thing. So what we want is we want runs on the board, we want successes, we want to say these guys are supplying reliably with the right quality and at the right price for any of the businesses in this area to utilize them.
Yeah, and then they can expand to other reserves and kind of convince them to get more involved in this as well.
And then their businesses grow, and when their businesses grow, then the wealth of the community grows. And the more of those businesses, the more we can scale that. And I very strongly believe it needs to start on a small scale, and that's why we've had the successes that we've had so far. And we're still early days, but we've had successes and we are moving. Now, you then organically grow that scale. So once you've actually established a model that works, you can say, okay, there it is. You guys can use the same idea, and you can contact that network, and they're already supplying, and so on. So you make it an easy thing to plug into. And then the next step from there, of course, is that the business incubator guys have to help those businesses get ready to scale, because then they'll actually start scaling properly, because then they have to now supply a broader range of customers. So there's a lot of business planning associated with that, and we want to make sure that it doesn't overwhelm them and they end up going like, oh God, no, I can't do this anymore, or they compromise on quality or availability or whatever. So this process has to be managed really carefully and in such a way that those guys fully succeed. And when they have fully succeeded, then we have ownership in the wildlife economy, and it's something that is on the agenda of national government. They've literally, our Minister of Environment and Fisheries and Forestry, she was here. They actually were at the headquarters of the Timbavati, where, by the way, and we'll talk about him, where Anton actually spoke to the minister about some of their challenges and some of the things that he sees as necessary to be in place, and she really heard him. But we also she brought up the issue of we need more ownership, broader, more inclusive ownership. And we said, yes, this is what we're doing. And so government has got that high on their agenda, and they also then need to see what it is that we are doing to create that ownership in the wildlife economy.
Yeah. Man, that's amazing, because I feel like, even in the States, there's similar topics, I guess, in terms of bringing minorities into leadership positions and making it more inclusive. But I feel like often the development part is left out, and what happens, and then this ends up creating arguments between sides, is you force someone into a position that maybe they're not ready for. Not that they don't have the potential to develop into it, but then it kind of, the naysayers then get to come in and say, hey,
Absolutely.
Well, this isn't working, like it's going to fall apart. So thinking about the education side, and then also how to include other businesses, It reminds me a little bit of, I lived in Los Angeles for a little bit on the, as a filmmaker,
right.
Try to get out there and make that happen. But I don't know what the percentages are, but that whole, a very large part of that community is based around that entertainment industry. And like you said, there's only so many jobs that are directly involved in, say, the wildlife conservation economy. But then there's all these indirect companies that are supporting. And the more they're able to be involved and support and build their businesses, then they have more money to spend within their communities, and then restaurants and other things start to pop up more.
Exactly.
And so it's just this cycle that you really have to get people to believe in that long-term vision to be able to start it on that small scale and build it over time.
You've hit the nail on the head, and we've actually seen what you referred to as, people being injected into, positions through no fault of their own, have not yet developed the capacity to do things. And then, of course, the very first thing that happens is that the naysayers go, you see, it doesn't work, But if it had been done in the right way, it would have worked. So, the intention to get there is the one thing, and I think we all know where that destination is, but how we get there and the strategies around making sure that we get there successfully is actually more important. So I think that, not to blow our own trumpets, but I do think that what's being done in the Timbavati is pretty unique, it's pretty forward-thinking, and it's being done in a way that I think is got a great chance of being very successful and scalable.
Well, let's talk about the protectors a little bit, because that's a huge part of what this film is all about, and this story. And we mentioned them a little bit earlier. Our mutual friend, the late Anton Zimba, I mean, he had the foresight as well to say that, the Rangers are buying us time. It's what we do with that time that really matters. Yeah. And these long-term strategies are really what he was talking about, and what really shifted our organization's focus from more ranger support to the youth and education and those types of things. But, I'd love to hear from you. What is the importance of these rangers on the ground? Maybe you can even start back. You said you guys got involved in 2008, which was really the beginning of this whole rhino poaching crisis, which created the need for more well-trained, elevated security within a lot of these reserves. But why are they important? What role do they play? Why should people within that landscape care about supporting these rangers?
Yeah. Well, so, I cannot, first things first, I just cannot overemphasize how important they are and how important they always will be, because we refer to it on the broader landscape, we refer to it not so much as security, but area integrity, because it involves a whole lot of other things just, beyond just security. So that being said, fundamentally important and will always be, because we are focusing now on a particular issue, which is rhino protection and the increase in rhino losses since 2008 and how that really ramped up. And what it did, first of all, was so we're talking about that, but even without that, there's still the need for area integrity. There can be, bushmeat poaching, which to me is more what poaching actually is. What these guys are doing in terms of rhino and in East Africa, elephant, it's not poaching, it's organized crime. That's what it is. It's literally like the drug trade. They've changed from, smuggling cocaine and heroin or whatever it might be to smuggling, parts of animals.
Yeah, a lot of parallels with things that are happening in Mexico and places like that.
Exactly.
The drug cartels. Yeah.
So these are cartels, and we must not fool ourselves that they are poaching rings. They are organized crime cartels. So, I think that it's taken us a while as a group of wildlife and conservation organizations. It took us a while to actually wake up and go, what the hell's going on? So we were caught, I think, a little bit on the back foot back in 2008. And, particularly the national parks, because they're a bigger machine with a lot more inertia, whereas the smaller reserve, the private reserves are, privately funded. We can respond quickly. We tend to be a lot more agile. And I think that was what we did. And that whole western boundary of the Kruger National Park, which is all private reserves forming part of Greater Kruger, was an area that has now very quickly developed into a major strength buffer for the national park, giving them a breather, because that possibility to enter into the reserve, into the national park through those parks has been cut off or reduced significantly. So in terms of the work that these guys needed to do, field rangers back in 2000 and, when we were first in the reserve, 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, they were guys that went out and checked on, erosion sites and,
how the water
was.
Right?
It was more conservation stuff, how the grasses are in certain areas. And of course they would check fence lines, and there was always, looking for snares. That's normal. That's what a reserve does. That's what the guys are normally trained to do. Until then, the wildlife crime associated with rhinos started to pick up. And then there had to be a change in gears, and these guys had to go for training that they were never subject to before. There was no need for it. They're literally almost becoming paramilitary to be able to respond to a threat that was a deadly threat. I mean, guys were not coming to kill a rhino and take its horn, with a knife and a spoon. These guys were coming armed with, automatic rifles. So it was literally having to respond to a deadly threat. And I think that the first of all, the willingness for those teams of men and women to put up their hands and say, I'm actually willing to do this, showed an incredible commitment, an incredible love for the bush and a love for what they are doing, as Anton's, tragic murder really indicated, is that they're literally putting their lives on the line. So what they do and how they do it has developed probably, 100-fold in the last 10 years. The investment in it has been significant, and ensuring that there are enough people on the ground doing what they're doing, ensuring that they are correctly and appropriately trained, and giving them all of the support associated with that has been part of this holistic model to okay, here we have our area protection services, our area integrity services, and I feel like, the Timbavati did particularly well. And I might be open to correction. I need to check what the stats are now, but I still think that we may still be sitting with being the lowest losses of rhino per hectare of any reserves in South Africa, certainly in the Lowveld Valley. But I'm very happy for somebody to correct me on that if I'm wrong. But it was at one stage very definitely that, and that happened through a number of interventions. But certainly a very big part of that was the development of that field ranger team, the support of that field ranger team with appropriate technologies, and deploying them effectively throughout the reserve, and supporting them effectively. And I think that the Timbavati has done particularly well on that. I'm really, really proud of the work that they've done. And I've been a little bit of a sideline observer because my involvement is more on the commercial operations and economic development as a portfolio on the executive committee, and there's other people and the actual management who are involved in security and area integrity, and I think that the work that they've done is really laudable. It's quite astonishing.
Yeah, I mean, myself and Matt and the whole team have spent so much time with those guys at the Timbavati especially, and just speaking with them and hearing their passion for the work, it's really inspiring. I mean, and it goes beyond, like you said, just the protection and the law enforcement side. They really care. I mean, Anton, he says it in our film that this was a calling from God for him, so he believed that this was his life's mission, essentially. And yeah, it's just been great to see how much the leadership is involved and how much they care about each other from both sides. And it's just great energy on that team. Can you talk a little bit to maybe I feel like you have a really great relationship with the ranger team, and you knew Anton to a degree, but whether it's in the Timbavati or other locations, can you almost make an argument to landowners or lodge owners why it's important to care about these teams? I mean, because sometimes, whether they're just separated, not that involved, maybe they're living abroad and it's being managed remotely, whatever the reason is, oftentimes I think there's a disconnect there, and these rangers rely on, you can talk maybe to it more, the levies from these landowners, but also just their support. And
So I think it's very easy to become disconnected from what's going on the ground, and it happens everywhere in the world where there's conflict of any sort. We have a culture of contentment and I'm okay. So you can very easily be forgiven for disconnecting from what's going on the ground and the day-to-day challenges that the guys and girls, because there are male and female field rangers out there, what they are faced with on a day-to-day basis, and the importance of the work that they're doing. Let me just go back to what you were saying, and this is not a job for the people who do this out of a genuine calling, it's a vocation. And so it's really, really important that they get the support and recognition for having made a commitment to something that is greater than just the job, the transaction value of that job. Of course, everyone gets paid. Of course, everyone has the insurances, and all of those things are there. But that's secondary to the real reason why they're doing it. It's a genuine sense of right and wrong. What is the integrity and a passion for wildlife in the bush. So that's important, and that's important to recognize that thing. So you're dealing with a group of humans here who are not just there to do a job. They are there to genuinely, pull together and try and make a difference. So we need to recognize that. That's the one thing that we've got to recognize. As people who are on the outside in a way supporting them, we have to recognize what a commitment it is from their side. So that deserves our support, first of all. And then the next thing is that in order to attract young people to develop the same passion to go into a similar vocation, those people who are already doing it need to be able to talk about it with the passion that they have and not become disillusioned or feel that in some way they're being let down, because then we're not going to get an injection of new young blood into these roles. So that is another important aspect of it. So I think that, what can we do so obviously there's two aspects to this. There's the sheer support, which is the financial support, and I'll talk a little bit about that, because there's a number of elements to that model that I think are very successful, particularly in the Timbavati side. And then the other side of it is the human side of it. So the emotional and psychological support that those teams need in order to do the work that they're doing effectively. So for us, let's talk a little bit about the whole psychological aspect of it. In order to be effective, they've got to be an effective team. And I think that the reserve management, and that's where I think that Timbavati does this particularly well, is that they've managed to develop an incredibly strong team of field rangers who are massively committed, and they work extremely well together. I liken it in a way to our family of staff who feel like we don't feel like we're doing a job. We feel like we're on a journey together doing something fantastic, and in their side, they're on a journey together doing something really important. So developing that comes from the reserve and its management. But we've had interactions with field ranger staff when we're, whether it be on a social level or more importantly, sometimes we will see them in their patrols in the bush. And that connection with them and saying, and I've always had our guides and our team, when they do see them, to just say, guys, thank you for what you're doing. It is so important to us what you're doing, and you're doing such an amazing job, and just thank you. So when those interactions happen, that happens on the ground from our side, and I can tell you certainly all the commercial lodges are briefed on how to do that and how best to, give the guys just an elevated sense of like, wow, I've got the support of everyone. Of course, it's not always easy for people who are far away to communicate with them, but you could do something as simple as sending an email or a message to Edwin or our central communications, just to say, I just want to lend my support and say what a great job you guys are doing, or whatever, just some words of encouragement. And that then gets fed through to the team on the ground, and it's a massive motivator. So the parallel with that is what we do as commercial operations. All of the feedback we get from our guests, every single email that says what a fantastic time they had, and they remember this person and that person, and how it was life-changing. We print those out, we put them on our notice boards, we bring the team together and say, look, your name is there. That's what you did. That's how you made that person feel. So I think that kind of feedback is a key motivator for people. So if one is far away, and I'm talking landowners, I'm talking, commercial operators, and I'm talking people who are connected with the reserve in a more tangential way, perhaps, there's nothing stopping one from just jumping behind the email or a WhatsApp and just sending a thing to say, geez, guys, amazing and well done, and we've got your back, we're supporting you. So that's the emotional and psychological side, which I think is super important.
To add to that before you go on, I think that's a big part of why this whole Rhino Man project got started, was because I think there was a lack of even understanding of what these men and women are doing out there, and recognition is so huge. And getting to work with Anton and Orlot even more, since he's taken Anton's place at the reserve, you really do realize how much this recognition impacts them. I mean, Orlot and Leda from the Black Mambas, they were both able to come with us to London and to Jackson in the States. And, I was talking to Orlot yesterday, and he was just saying, it's so amazing to see that there's other people out there doing this work in different parts of the world, and that's pretty exciting. But then also having all these people from just your average Joe all the way up to the Prince of the United Kingdom saying, we really appreciate what you're doing, and we want to support you and thank you. I mean, it's interesting because I know this is how it is in the States. I mean, the military is always, you're always encouraged to tell them thank you for your service and give them that recognition. But these Rangers are doing similar frontline work, especially in these contexts where it really is life or death. And to be able to just take that time and say, hey, thank you, I appreciate what you're doing out there, even as a tourist, if you have that interaction, is
very much
so huge.
Yeah, so I think that is exactly as you say. It's that encouragement just binds a team more and more together. So I can't say enough how important it is that people at least do something like that. And then, of course, there's the crucial thing, which is that we can't build these teams, we can't do what we're doing without the finances to do it. So what we've done is we've developed a model within the reserve that the landowners in the reserve pay into, and then we have the revenue streams from commercial activity, and the commercial lodges charge a levy to every paying guest, and that levy then has a portion that goes, well, first of all, the entire levy goes to the reserve, and a large portion of that is allocated to the actual area integrity services. So that'll be a portion of the operational budget of the reserve. So that all goes in there, and then there's also the portion of that which also goes then to the Timbavati Foundation, which is the community arm, and that's involved then with the lodges and the reserve for our supply chain development projects. So it's not going directly to the rangers, but it's also going to the overall long-term view, which is what we're after. So those contributions are very much based on people, coming and visiting the reserve and seeing what's happening on the ground. And what we've done to encourage that further, and quite a few of the lodges do it. So it's actually getting people out to get involved with some of the conservation and security activities that are going on in the reserve. One of the things that has been worked on over a number of years, and a lot of the lodges support that, is by, paying for a group of guests to go along when a rhino needs to be darted and DNA is taken and, the ears notched and so on, and then they take a whole lot of readings. And that is work that has to go on all the time. And so, having those contributions is important. And it exposes people more directly to what is going on the ground. The thing that we're doing more regularly now, which is amazing, is, and this is something that the guests to the reserve, certainly in the commercial lodges, or even members' families can do, is to pay for a helicopter flight that is specifically an area integrity flight. So it's a security patrol flight. It's still amazing. It's literally an aerial safari. I mean, you're up there like seeing stuff from the
those
air.
pilots I know some of them are pretty amazing too, to be in the air with them.
Phenomenal. So we've got a few in the area, and working with the reserve. So we work with the reserve. When somebody wants to do that, they can take 2 people up, and they then, we will have one of the other senior field rangers with them, who is the eyes doing the actual work that they're wanting to do, but then explaining to those guests what it is that they're doing. Why are we flying in this area? What are we looking for? When we see it, what do we report back to headquarters? So basically, you're involved with something that is actually part of the interior integrity mechanism of the reserve. It's not Disney. It's not something that's just being put on for you. And literally, I mean, I've spoken to Edwin about this. Who's our general manager and warden of the reserve. If he could do 2 a day and we could afford to do it, we would do it. And so by guests contributing to it, it allows them to go on it on the actual excursion, but also at the same time fund that excursion. So that means that it takes the funding responsibility away from the reserve, and so I mean it's a complete win-win.
Yeah.
And we found that more and more people are getting involved in doing that. And again, same thing. You now have people who see what is going on and they go, oh wow, okay. And then there's that willingness to say, but could I contribute in some way? And we've actually found that a lot. I know that our great friends Warren and Alicia from King's Camp in the north, they have massive involvement with guests who literally go, our conservation levies are not enough. I want to contribute more. And we've seen the same thing. Where can I put money in that's going to make a difference? So we've had recently, which is also a big part of that area integrity team that is part of the field rangers. I mean, you will know this actually much better than I do, is the sniffer dogs and the dog teams. I mean, absolutely phenomenal. And we had them come to Tanda Tula the other day and show us how they actually do what they do. Immediately, guests are like, this is fantastic. How can we contribute? We're like, sure thing. We put them in touch with the reserve, and then they can make contributions. So, obviously, financial contribution is a super important thing. So that is the one aspect, and we talk about it, and that's how we do it. And then the other one is the emotional and psychological support, which can be as easy as just writing a few words and sending them through.
Yeah, I think that's so great, especially connecting guests and people visiting the reserve with the work that's going on, because I mean, it's such an easy story to tell and people connect with it. It's just giving them that opportunity through either, like you said, an experience that they can pay for that also supports them, and then they get to meet them. Then they become the advocates when they go home and tell these stories and say, oh, this is this amazing ranger that I met, and we did this helicopter ride, and this is what's happening in the area and why we need to support it. Yeah. That type of work is pretty amazing. Yeah.
So I think that kind of answers what you were on about, is how can people get involved, and how do they really sort of contribute to the efforts of the field ranger teams.
Yeah, I guess as we're kind of coming to an end here, I'd like to go back to Tanda Tula more, and maybe you can, I think I read in 2021, and you mentioned earlier that you guys did a remodel. And maybe you could talk about what it looks like now, what some of the opportunities for people to come and visit and get involved would be like, someone that's looking at Tanda Tula as an option to come visit this area.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's great. I'll do a little pitch. No, I think that, for us, it's been a real, it's been a labor of love and a great journey to have gone on. So in 2020, obviously COVID hit. We as an industry were all shut down, and our landowning partner, we sat down with him in 2021, and we all looked at this and said, we've been kind of just trying to hold on to what we've got right the way through 2020. We need to now think expansively, and let's look at what we want to do. So that was the start of the whole journey to remodel our flagship camp, Tanda Tula Safari Camp, and we realized that the infrastructure was aging, and we really needed to change. But we'd also done a design for a new camp in the neighboring Kruger Reserve, which we were going to start building around about when COVID hit, and luckily we didn't. So the question was, do we revive that, or do we do something here at Safari Camp? And our landowning partner said, listen, I'd really just love to rebuild this. And we said, okay, then that's what we're going to do. So we got on board with a new design. And what we also wanted to do was we wanted to solidify our commitment to the reserve in this build, which meant we didn't want something that felt too transitionary. And in a way, whilst we love the tents and we have our DNA is in the tents, we felt that for Safari Camp, what we wanted to do was something that tipped its hat to the tents, still gave you this incredible sort of all-around visual and auditory experience that, certainly the auditory experience is what the tent offers, not so much a visual, because you only have these dinky little views. But we wanted to open up the views, and we wanted to allow you still to hear the sounds of the bush outside. So we thought through how could we do that, but still do something that is more solid and permanent in the bush, and give our team a sense of permanence, that this home is here to stay. It's not just a temporary structure. So with that philosophy, we then went through the whole design process, and I feel extremely proud of what's been achieved there. I mean, the architect was Nicholas Pluman, and he's done numerous camps around Africa for a variety of customers, and he really listened to us in terms of how we should, how we're going to operate this thing, and then also what were the key features that we really wanted in the look and feel of the camp. So it was a big step forward in terms of modernizing the whole safari experience. That was the intention. The intention was to say, we've done this for 25 years it's been in place. Let's now do something different that's going to take us forward for the next 25, 50 years. So we needed a new kind of look and a whole kind of new philosophy around it. And so he really listened to that, and I think he came up with something beautiful. We're very, very proud of it, very, very happy with it. It certainly did elevate the overall experience compared to what you get in a tent. But it's still got all of the canvas paneling and so on. So there's still that sense of we're honouring our DNA by still having all of the canvas elements to the buildings. But what we also did was we opened up a lot in terms of the visual aspect of it. So rotating the units around so that the view is towards the riverbed. All sliding glass doors. So you literally, and then these sliding canvas panels on the sides, where you have a baboon-proof gauze, so you can leave those things open all night and listen and smell the sounds of the bush. And you have this visual 180-degree view, which is it's just phenomenal. It's way better than what we ever expected. And then, of course, the lounge area, we try to keep it kind of the same configuration in terms of where the pool was and so on. But we added some operational elements that I think were really, really useful for us, like having a dining space that we can close down in bad weather and people can sit there. Obviously, keeping a boma, and the lounge and the bar area, which were always so central to the Tanda Tula experience. Everyone gathered around that bar at night, so it was really iconic. So we wanted to create something that was iconic in the same way, and I think that was done beautifully. And everything was orientated in a way that I've had lots of return guests come and go, guys, it feels very different, but somehow it feels the same, which is really cool. So just in the look. And then, of course, you've got the whole Tanda Tula team, who thankfully we never lost anyone during COVID, and right the way through the build, where we moved our entire operation to a temporary camp, which we invented overnight and called Tanda Tula Plains Camp. And thanks to one of our other neighbours who was willing to lease us his facility for a year and a half. So the team carried on going all the way through. So the experience that we're delivering at the new safari camp is very much what everyone came to love about the Tanda Tula over the years that we've been running with it. So the team is very much still the same people. We still have, and in a way, I was slightly nervous. I was kind of like, listen, this infrastructure is stratospherically incredible. I mean, it is just mind-blowing. And I thought, is there a possibility that the team is going to be a little bit like deer in the headlights and be a bit awestruck by the level that they're operating in now and perhaps almost become too formal in a way? Anyway, I need never have concerned myself because they just took ownership of this thing and they just ran. And I mean, the humor and the love and the caring that is shown by all of them, you know, and when I say ownership, they really, it's like theirs, you know. And so that was amazing and wonderful to see. So that is what we have on offer for everyone now, is a very, a safari camp that is committed to the future of the Timbavati. We are there to stay, and we plan to do more, which is the other thing, because, within the scope of what one can do in the constitution of the reserve, I think there is still space for a few more commercial beds. We don't want to overdo it. Nobody wants to overdo the number of commercial beds in the reserve. We want to keep it as wild and as low density as we've always had. There is space for a little bit more, so we're definitely entertaining that, and also entertaining the doing another tented operation, which would be Safari Camp 2.0 in our neighbouring Klaseri Reserve. So reviving the project that we had started pre-COVID, but we will probably redesign it and start afresh. But that will be a tented operation. So we're looking at expanding to allow our staff the opportunity to grow further and to be able to employ more people and create more opportunities for people within the tourism economy of our reserve.
Yeah, I haven't actually visited Tanda Tula yet, but I was looking at the website beforehand, and I mean, some of the views from those rooms.
No, it's crazy.
And just the structure itself, it's really, really beautiful. And I'm wondering, if you're thinking about you're thinking about tourists coming to visit, what would you tell them? Because I mean, you guys are involved in so many incredible ways with the community, with the rangers, with the reserve, the greater landscape. As a tourist coming to a place, whether it's South Africa or otherwise, what would you encourage them to do in terms of looking into how these lodges and landowners are participating in that greater community or handling their staff?
Super important.
And just so that you feel good about where your dollars are going, as well as having a beautiful experience.
Absolutely. Look, I think that we've always felt that that anybody coming particularly to a wilderness environment should take the time to do a bit of research and see wherever they're going, are the places that they're going to operating responsibly and sustainably in all aspects, being environmentally, in terms of their commitment to the development of the areas that they are in terms of their support of their teams and how they work with their people. I think that you can't, some of it you can't know until you're on the ground, granted, but talking to people and certainly interrogating the tour, because we still rely heavily on tour operators and travel agents to bring us our guests. Reason being that, and you can talk to any of the commercial lodges in the low-felt environment, the same goes for East Africa, Botswana. Nobody comes there are one or two who do, but very few people come just to Tanda Tula and then go home. They're all doing a circuit. And stitching that circuit together and getting multiple lodges within the South African landscape with the, do they have availability? Do you have availability? How am I going to get from there to there? Stitching it all together, then going on to Cape Town, whatever, Joburg. So they have a really, really important role to play in terms of stitching that entire trip together. And I can tell you we work very strongly with a lot of really, really well-informed tour operators and travel agents who know our products and who know what's going on the ground. And those are the guys who can give information to people who are wanting to visit these areas, is to say, this is the reason that you're going to go to that area, because these guys are doing these certain things. These are the project that they're involved in. This is how you're supporting what they are doing. So what we've done actually, we also took a little bit of a leap when we started the new safari camp, was we said, guys, we're gonna actually bundle our conservation levies to the reserve, our Tanda Tula foundation fees. There's also a levy that we ring fence for contribution to the Bushbuck Ridge municipality and the way that they run. So that money goes through to them. And we have conservation activities that are our responsibility, but not part of our hospitality operation. And so we have all of these 4 different fees, and we rolled them into one and said, this is what it is. And then what we've done is in camp, we've actually got an infographic. It's also on our website to show this is where your dollar is going for these things. So this is not your bed rate. Okay, it's not commissionable. It's not part of your experience in terms of going on game drives or walks or eating the dinner or the chocolate on the pillow and so on. This is your contribution directly to the reserve, the land, the wildlife, and the people that you're coming to visit. And so that's been really enthusiastically received by, certainly by our trade partners and the guests that have been paying it. They really like to see what it is that how they're contributing, how much of their dollar is going straight into these, into the various projects. So we're kind of also encouraging other operations to look at doing that, taking it and packing it into a total figure and saying, this is, make it easy. That's your sustainability levy, as we call it. And some of it goes to the reserve, some of it goes to our education foundation, some of it goes to the community, some of it goes into conservation work. And it makes it easier then for the tour operators to talk to guests about it and explain what it is exactly that each of those elements are doing. So yeah, that's that. But I do think, going back to your original question, which is, what do guests need to do to ensure that they are coming and supporting places that are genuinely involved? I think the answer is speak to the people who are helping you put the trip together. And if you don't have that, try and find people on the ground, the network that you know, to ensure that you are going to places that are not just paying lip service to the necessity for the sustainability practices.
Yeah, not just throwing buzzwords in the website or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's become a thing, we've heard terms, greenwashing, we've heard all of these things, because it's been recognized that people are doing it and they're not committed to do it at all. So I think that knowing that that the people who you are going to see and visit are genuinely committed to what they're doing, and are not just kind of like, okay, yes, all right, I'll do it. That's a crucial part of it, because that's part of the sustainability model, is that you have to first be committed. If you're not committed, you're only going to stay doing what you're doing for a sustainable process for as long as someone else tells you to do it. So those are the questions I would be, looking at as a guest traveling to these areas. Yeah.
As a final question, I'd love to hear your thoughts and advice for someone that could be either deciding to start a lodge, doing something crazy like that, or just getting involved in conservation or the greater community that's kind of connected to this wildlife ecosystem. What would you tell them looking at their future and where they're heading?
So the first thing I'd say is if you have a desire to do this, don't let anything else stand in your way. If it's genuinely, like I did, I had a desire, I did do something else, I did something I was super passionate about, but that itch never went away. I had to end up doing it. So that's the first thing. If this is if it's something that's genuinely part of what you want to do, don't let stuff stand in your way. You will find the doors will open eventually. Very importantly, I think for somebody who's coming from the outside who doesn't have any window into a network, the most important thing is to actually talk to people on the ground, and before deciding what to get involved in or how one can get involved, is to understand the landscape and speak to a lot of people and get a network going. And particularly with the Lowveld Valley where we operate, there are very well established structures in place and people that one can talk to that can point one in the right direction to say, okay, like, for example, speak to the Timbavati Nature Reserve, the Klesiri, the Thorny Bush, the Umbabat, the Sabi Sands, and, see how they're connected, see what their community and conservation arms are that they're working with, who are the organizations that they connect to, because that also brings legitimacy to there may be somebody who wants to get involved with something, but then could get hoodwinked into supporting something that's not genuine at all. So the important thing is to do the research, speak to the well-known reserves and structures that are on the ground in those areas, and then, get directed as to where one, can contribute in a really positive and impactful way. And in fact, we've literally just had a tour operator, a very bespoke tour operator, with us at Tanda Tula the last couple of nights, and they, in addition to what their guests pay to, they take a portion of their commission. Okay, so the guests pay. We then break it down into what we earn, and they have the portion that they earn. They ring fence a portion of that. And then they have now started a process of getting a group, again, a coalition of willing tour operators to go, okay, we'll pool this money together. We actually take it out of our earnings, and we can then, choose an operation, or not say an operation, but a project that is, to our liking in the area. And this crowd actually spoke to the Timbavati Foundation and then asked me, what are your thoughts on the Timbavati Foundation? And I said, listen, that's legitimate. You can totally, and you can actually speak to them and say, this is where I want the funds directed if you have a particular interest, So those are and so they're doing it the right way. They've spoken, they've got the network, they've sort of like thought about how they want to do it, and then that's the way that they'll channel the funds. So do the research. That's important. And for people who wanting to jump off their corporate, what's that little thing called? The
Hamster
wheel. Yeah. And enter the hospitality industry. It is the most glorious industry. It gives us joy and, laughs every single day. But don't make the mistake of thinking that it's a soft industry. This is a proper tourism is a proper sector. It is as relevant, it is as complex, it is as technology driven, it is as energized as banking, mining, any of those sectors as well. It's a serious industry. So if you do want to do it, it will be fun, but it's not just for fun. You're embarking in something that's proper, and I think that the game lodge sector in particular, don't make the mistake of thinking that it's just all a bed of roses every day. There's challenges for sure, like any other business, and there are, it's one of those businesses that requires masses of investment for quite a humble return. So one has to go with their eyes wide open from that perspective.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you taking the time, Don, to share your story and the story of Tanda Tula and all the work you guys are doing. It's just so great to hear how engaged you are with this local community and your people and the reserve. It makes me feel good. And
Thanks, John.
I'm glad people get to hear it through this podcast, so really appreciate it.
Fantastic. Thank you, and thank you for your time. Thank you for the work that you guys are doing as well. It's been, we've watched this journey, particularly of the film that you guys have been doing, and I've watched the journey of GCC and how that's developed as well. And hats off to you guys. Fantastic job. And thank you for having me.
Cheers. Thank you for listening to the Rhino Man podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you're excited to see the film succeed, please subscribe, like, rate, and review our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. Then follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Rhino Man the Movie. More details about Rhino Man, the social impact campaign, and future screenings are at rhinomanthemovie.org. To learn more about the Global Conservation Corps and their work, visit globalconservationcorps.org. Sign up for the newsletter and follow GCC on all of the social platforms. If you like this podcast, make sure to subscribe to and catch up on GCC's Voices of Nature podcast. where Bob Ludke interviews a wide range of people who have dedicated their lives to making a difference in conservation. A special thanks goes out to Simone Wilson for the music for this podcast. He is a brilliant composer for Rhino Man the movie. Learn more about his work at simonewilsonmusic.com. Until next time, I'm John Jerko, and this is the Rhino Man Podcast.